Forbidden Technique presents almost 100 different awards, the prestigious Golden Globe statue, and now the Oscar, the most coveted award in the world of film industry. Cat from Flow is currently touring the world's cinemas, seen by millions. Latvia has never had such success in its cinema history. At first it seems that a miracle has happened, and a miracle has happened. But it is also a story about talent and team. It is a story of patience and perseverance and of work, of ambition and knowledge, of the new and experienced generation, about small Latvia and the big world. To show all this, we decided to investigate and analyze both how Flow and Team of Flow were born, and the key causal links in this success, and the rules of the big film industry, where the Flow cat had to know how to swim. This is a unique opportunity that could not be missed. Part 1. Beginning. Film. Away. Script, characters, money. June 2019. France. Annecy, a town near Switzerland, is home to Europe's largest annual animation film festival. This year, a new competition was unveiled in the Contre-champ category, which highlights something particularly unusual or unique.
Now, let me tell you a little bit about the selected filmmaker. He managed in a very deliberate and brave way to create a new, unique universe. His film has hypnotic quality that draws the audience into a mystical world of beauty, tension, and fear. Gints Zilbalodis for Away.
Latvian Gints Zilbalodis for the feature-length animated film Away. It should be noted that he is not only the director of this film, but also, and here are the main credits: screenplay by Gints Zilbalodis, artist Gints Zilbalodis, animator Gints Zilbalodis, editor Gints Zilbalodis, composer Gints Zilbalodis, producer Gints Zilbalodis. And, as he later reveals himself, the film itself is actually about Gints Zilbalodis. Of course, indirectly, because it is directly about a young boy who, after suffering a plane crash in a deserted area, meets a monster from which he flees on a motorbike, trying to return home. The Annecy Award is followed by others, in Japan and the US. In Latvia, Away also won the Lielais Kristaps Award. Animation critics and fans are delighted and surprised at the same time. Such unusual signature style and everything done by himself. But Gints Zilbalodis himself came to Arta Panorama a bit embarrassed.
How did it feel to receive the Lielais Kristaps?
Very nice feeling. Yes, it has been traveling all over the world and won awards. But recognition in Latvia is something special.
But for me, the question still lingers. Why alone? Well, you can delegate something. I wonder if it could be more fun or easier.
You can, but I wanted to make the film myself because I wanted to learn all the elements of filmmaking. I think the best way to learn is to try it for yourself.
Gints Zilbalodis, then 25, becomes the new star among animators, and the success of Away would later prove to be very decisive. However, at the time, Gints remained invisible to the wider public. The film Away is not even in the top 10 films that year. In Latvia, there's The Lion King, there's How to Train Your Dragon, and there are all the ones with flashy advertisements. But Gints is not an advertiser or promoter, and not really a spokesman. He has his own nature, his own room in his parents' artist's home, his own computer, and his own cartoons. The first ones were made when Gints was studying and had graduated from the Janis Rosenthal's Riga Art High School.
I think I wrote to him on Facebook or something.
Matis Kaja, producer of the film Flow, co-author of the screenplay. He received his higher education in the USA at the New York University Tisch School of the Arts. He has furthered his knowledge at the American Film School and the Latvian Academy of Culture. He has directed several films himself. He has also directed 2 theater productions in Latvia, but at that time...
We met after I had watched his short films on the internet. We just arranged to meet. That was 8-9 years ago, maybe. I just thought it was such an interesting case. These films also had a visual approach that was very unusual for animation.
Mattis, Gints' peer, socially confident, active, very sociable, studied in faraway lands among strangers. And Mattis was also taking his first steps in cinema at the time. They met and talked, and Gints shared his thoughts and asked for advice about the then upcoming film, Away. But what exactly is his special approach to animation that Mattis saw? First of all, it's all done on the computer, in a three-dimensional environment, without sketches or shot plans. And secondly, it's the special principle of the immersive camera.
This means that we create the feeling that there is a cameraman in this environment together with this cat, who is there with a handheld camera. That is the effect of presence, like we would actually be there with the cat, rather than in a static wide shot, for example. And all the time this camera is reacting to what is happening. This is Gints' favorite principle of camera staging. He's been using it since those short films where I noticed it. And of course that comes from feature films. It's not a common technique in animation, but in feature films like Children of Men, directed by Alfonso Cuarón, there are these long shots that come in with this immersive camera. Well, in Latvia, you could say that Alexander Grebnev is the one who has shot several films in this style. Yes, including mine.
Well, even a unifying style. And knowing all this, in Gints' place, who would you call if you wanted to make another film that the whole world would probably be watching? And Gints wanted that. Mattis, with his US education, his ambition, and his ability to communicate with the public, fit him like a glove.
I think he had already proved himself as an author and had encountered his limitations. He realized that he was not able to pull this off on his own. And that's where the team comes in.
The idea of a cat that escapes from floods has been with Gints for a long time. At the age of 18, he had even made a 7-minute film called Aqua, or Water. There was a cat and a bird. There was also a boat, but the animation was very rough at that time, more like a sketch. But what if all this could be developed to a next level? And so the idea for a film called Flow was born, for which the Latvian translation stream was only later found. But who was the first person Gints invited to join the team?
He invited me in late 2019 or early 2020 to join the Flow project to initially write this script. Pieslēgties pie projekta Straume, lai uzrakstītu šo scenāriju. He had never written scripts for films because he makes them by himself, so there's no point in him writing a script. He just straight up makes the film. And also because there was no need to tell or show anyone in the team what to do, because he does everything himself. But this was the case where he did want to get other artists involved in the work, and perhaps acquire a funding at some point.
The script means there's a cat, there's a flood, and then you're just wondering what happens next.
We have the cat, who is an individualist, the dog, who is a follower, the capybara, who is calm in all circumstances and a friend to all, so to speak. Then there is the secretary bird, who is a strong leader and has a certain view of what should happen and how it should happen. And then there is lemur, who simply creates chaos in almost all circumstances. Shortly, each character has to be distinctive in its personality, but at the same time, through each character you should recognize a certain kind of person.
Gints, on the other hand, quite regularly describes his work on the film on his Facebook page.
Flow could be the first film in which capybara is one of the main characters. I was inspired by how calm and relaxed they are and how diplomatic and friendly they are with other animals. Although I identify more with the cat, my desire is to emulate capybara. The bird is the only character that the cat looks up to. We chose Secretary Bird from South Africa for this role because of its majestic and authoritative appearance.
The character I remember, with whom we wrestled quite a lot, was the bird, because he was initially a bit of an antagonist. We realized that we don't really want any character as an antagonist.
But as for the cat itself, where did it come from? Gint's answer?
Two cats I grew up with, Josephine and her son Oigar. They are the inspiration for the Flow cat, but I didn't try to copy them exactly.
Mattis' remark has a bit of a marketing twist.
A cat is an extremely handy animal to choose as a protagonist. Because cats are extremely cunning animals, it is also extremely interesting to observe their physiognomy. They're like rubber bands in the way they move. They are interesting from all aspects of cinema. Besides, what is the top web content? Clearly, cat videos on TikTok. You're guaranteed some kind of audience right away.
It's all very well, but to get it done, first of all, you need more people.
Yes, we realized that if we wanted to work at a very high level on character animation, then we would need additional staff. Because in Latvia, 3D animators have experience mostly in commercials and short formats. We don't have 3D animation, one that could be called an industry. And so we realized we could make this film as a European production with multi-country involvement.
And secondly, you need money. Yes, that's right. And in that sense, Ron Dyens became one of the key people and producers of the film Flow.
He is a very experienced animation producer from France. I had no experience in animation production at that point. France has very high-end animation schools, and the level is incomparably higher. There is an industry there.
Founder of the French animation studio Sacrebleu, producer of numerous animated films and shorts that have won César Awards at the French National Film Festival and several animation awards at the Annecy Festival, and the list goes on.
Donc moi, je suis le producteur français de Flow.
My job was to find the funding, convincing French sponsors to participate in the film so that Gints could get more money to make his film in better conditions than it was with Away.
Afin de pouvoir donner plus de moyens à Gints pour pouvoir faire son film dans des meilleures conditions que sur
During the making of Away, he had actually worked alone, and this time he wanted to work with a team. It means with people who should be paid.
Donc avec des gens qu'il fallait payer.
Therefore, my job was to find the money to produce the film more professionally.
And that is what we've already highlighted. If it hadn't been for Away winning the prize at the Annecy Festival, it wouldn't have been so easy to approach a man of his stature. But Ron still remembers Away.
I was immediately taken by this film. It literally hypnotized me, and it was probably the first time I watched a film on my laptop and did nothing else in parallel. And I said to myself, this is a sign. This film is great. This director is talented, and I definitely need to work with him. I wanted to meet him, so I contacted Gints via Messenger, and I told him that I definitely wanted to talk to him to see if he had a new project and if he was looking for a co-producer. And Gints kindly contacted me, wrote back and said, "Here, I'm doing a project called Flow, and I'll get in touch when I've finished writing it."
And the time was right. And the springboard of the success of Away helped them further. The author is the same. The style is similar. But now it will be all about the cat. The main thing, they needed money. All in all, Flow cost about 3.4 million euros, which is, of course, nothing compared to the animation budgets of the USA's Disney and other film studios. But for Latvia, and the idea of bunch of 20-year-olds, this, however, was Mattis and Ron's job, to go and convince everyone. First, A total of 860,000 euros came from Latvia and the Latvian National Film Centre. Then the European Co-Production Fund came up with another 400,000, but they needed more.
In France, we applied to the Film Center and to several regional funds, and it was mostly handled by the French producer. But he was also looking for private partners. For this film, they were Arte and Canal, so big streaming and TV channels.
And they succeeded. There was also a hope from the Germans, but the Germans?
German foundations and TV stations were quite puzzled by the project. What will it be? Art house animation? For what kind of audience will it be made? Will it be for adults or children? They weren't sure. For adults, they said, it could be a little childish. Whereas for kids, will they be able to follow the story? Is the tone of the film a bit too meditative? Would it work for children? In other words, Germans were used to more commercial animation and didn't see the potential in this film. And then, quite desperately, we immediately looked for an alternative partner and found it in Belgium. Because Belgium is a very quick place to get funding. There, the funds work quite fast.
And a third partner who helped with all this, Gregory of the Belgian production company, Take 5. And this company works not only in animation, and see how well it is that they know each other here.
It was Ron Dyens, the French producer from Sacrebleu, who reached out to me about Flow. We had just co-produced the animated film Sirocco and the Kingdom of the Winds together. And the collaboration had gone really, really well. So Ron and Matisse were looking for a third co-producer to finalize Flow's budget and handle also part of the animation and sound post-production. So they sent me the project, and I remember diving into it immediately. I read the script in one go. I watched the first animation test, and I saw Gints' previous films. And 24 hours later, I called Matisse and Ron to tell them I wanted to be part of the adventure.
And while some were looking for money, Gints was looking for teammates. Part 2. Making of the film, movement of the images, landscape, water, music. Gints was looking for a team, for people who could have their own roles in the project. Someone he knew from school, someone Matisse recommended, someone who had already done 3D animation, and he approached him personally. And there was also an advert for someone who knows how to work a blender. Blender is the free 3D animation software that the film was made in. The main visionary, without a doubt, was Gints. And let's start to get acquainted and slowly discover how 3D animation is made. And it's not drawing, it's more like sculpting. And we start with the film's setting and its main creator, Arthurs Gore, a video game artist in his daily life and a concept artist in the film Flow. And his first emotions are not explicitly about the film, but about how he was almost not in the Flow team, because he had missed Gints' email, even though he really needed a job at the time. He was desperately looking for it. He opened up the email to pay the bills.
Somehow I was not used to communications via email. Either someone DMs straight in PlayStation or so, and I see that he sent me the letter a month ago. At the time, I was in shock. I thought, oh God, what an idiot am I? I found him immediately on Facebook, and I wrote to him on Facebook.
Nothing is missed and come to work.
My job is to create everything that are not characters. The environment, nature, some kind of architecture, then the objects that the images interact with, that is, everything that is not alive. Most often it comes from Gints' briefing. Most often it's a little library on Pinterest with some collected pictures for inspiration or some examples of the details he likes. We can see how many references are there just in the house setting. And now you see for yourselves how many there are. It's all the things that we were inspired by, or are inspired by, or that we take as an example, let's say, or some of these elements inside. There are interiors, exteriors, and all sorts of things that we can fill the house with.
And he researches and offers it to Gints. Then they both choose. And that's what Gints' comment on Facebook is about. How, for example, the house where the cat lived was made.
In the script, the cat's house was just an ordinary house. As we developed animation and concept art, we decided to turn it into a sculptor's studio. It is important to be open to new ideas and not to follow the script too rigidly. Yes, that house is one of my favorite places in my heart. Probably because I needed to create that feeling of everything being very cozy and warm there. And so maybe it responded to my soul with something cozy and warm. And there was a very interesting incident recently when my friends watched the film. They told me that the cat house reminded them very much of my sauna in the countryside, which I had built with my grandfather. And the funny thing is that I didn't even think of the sauna as a concept, but I realized that it was probably just something I had done subconsciously.
The other notable object was the boat. And Gints' comment?
The boat's design is inspired by the Mediterranean boats called felucas. As this is the most important location, we spent a lot of time on all the details in the film.
This boat is based on traditional Egyptian sailing boats. In terms of form, that's what Gints had in mind at the very beginning. I studied it for a week and a half because the biggest difficulty there was that there's not really a boat anywhere, not a 3D model, not pictures taken from one boat, where you can pick up and look at every single mechanism, every single joint, what it looks like. And in the end, I had to collect a whole library of close-up pictures from different boats.
Kristuna Rezviha, a scenographer, she created the vegetation for the film Flow. She responded to an advert for Blenderers because she had worked with the program at the Academy of Fine Arts. And why not try something new?
It was not only a plant world, but we also had to make a library, which the French animators and everyone else then worked with.
For example, she really liked clover with its leaves like hearts.
Well, yes, these are also very popular. They show up everywhere very imperceptibly, like some kind of white dots, but there are quite a lot of them. It's a lily of the valley.
And she collected and built a herbarium.
From Grandma's garden, but she lives in Estonia. But there are also the same plants as here. I knew I will find something very similar. In the film, I also used meadow flowers.
And then the plants were created on the computer.
It's like a one huge brush that I work with on each plant. And then it is supposed to go through the camera, and also the composition should be checked. And so for each part of the film, 1 second at a time. So I spent a year painting the plants.
And when it comes to composition, it's good that it doesn't have to be a naturally existing habitat. Put whatever plants you want, but when you slither, the immersive camera is always there.
Gints had several cameras, several angles, and he had to check all the time to make sure that the grass wasn't suddenly in front of the camera. So there was a need to create several compositions for the same environment. It was one of the most difficult jobs.
And as she started to work with plants then, she continues to do it still. She has already written a master's in them. And Christine admits that even when she is watching a film,
I only watch the plants. Unfortunately, I still do it.
Paula Bobrova. She hadn't worked on a film before this one, studied computer game design and graphics at university. In the flow, She was a character artist. She knew Gints, having seen his films before.
The first ones were birds, and then the next ones were fish. Then I did it in parallel. Then I went back to the fishes and back to the birds. And then, yes, Gints was the one who also gave all the work assignments and to whom I showed everything. And that is how it happened. These were the ones that were in the film, and Gints still used quite a lot of those fish designs. I think there was a shot at the bottom as well. This is where the lemurs begin. Yes, I made birds, fishes, deers, roes. I didn't do a lot for the cat. I was just making its fur whether wet or fuzzy. And I also drew and thought about dogs.
What they emphasize is that working with Gints is stress-free, and he gives everyone the opportunity to express themselves.
As a person, he is phenomenally methodical. I mean, you can see that every single thing that he's approached, he's studied it, he's researched the options before he starts to communicate with someone. And if he comes to you with a question, it means that there's something to be solved, not just something to chat about.
Konstantins Wisniewskis, one of the most experienced in the Flow team, has been creating 3D computer graphics for commercials for about 15 years. His first main task was to bring the characters to life, which is one of the most difficult processes. And for that to happen, each character has to have rigs.
Rig is like a skeleton with all the controls that allow the animators to pick up the animal on the paw and put it down. Then take the steps, all the movements, and so on. Everything an animator does, he does it with the controls you give him. Here is the bird itself, for example. And then, by changing those controls, we can move its wings and everything else. You can also, say, control the wind, so that its feathers move in the wind. The very first thing I did was to give him a chance to model and animate a lemur character. It worked relatively well, but then they gave me the main character to rig next, which is a cat. And it turned out that cats are very much the most difficult animals to rig in general. Because most animals have such limbs that if you move a little paw or something, for example, then they move pretty much like that. But for a cat, it's like a bag of muscles and bones. And when he moves his paw, his skin sort of slides over the body. To rig it in a way it looks realistic is extremely difficult.
He labored and labored.
Then, I don't know if I can call it luck or the opposite, that I was sort of denied the job of rigging, because then the French animation studios started to do it.
Because time is money, and the French have more resources and, you could say, more training.
Second of animation of this quality takes about a day to produce. So it turns out that in this particular film, there were about 15 or 16 seconds per person per day. So a pretty substantial amount. The French animation director was quite clever in arranging that he got all 15 people on board and that the process actually happened quickly.
But he didn't lose his job. Then he animated simulations of all kinds.
I mean, sort of close-ups of water. When, say, a cat jumps into the water, there's splashes and stuff like that in the close-up. Then there were some simulations with landslides of some kind. And then say, make the fish swim, because a director needs to control a school of fish. He can't animate each one individually, and hiring an animator to do it wouldn't be very practical either. So I was the one who designed the system, so that you can just draw a curve where the stop points are. Where the fish are swimming, then the whole school is swimming according to some system.
Kristaps Blumbergs is the youngest member of the Flow team, and when he started, he was still at school. He previously had a months-long internship. Kristaps' job at Flow?
I would say that the whale would really be my proudest moment. Because I don't know why Gints not only gave me a model to redo from the original sculpt, but he also told me to make an armature rig for that whale, which I thought was mostly done by Constantins with more quality. But I managed to make something that looked quite good in the end, because it moved quite well for the film in the end.
The main character of the film, the cat and several other animals on the film, thus came to the French and their work supervisor, Léo Silly-Pellissier, who works in Paris but part of his team in Marseille. And making a cat move was not easy.
To respond to the different aspects of the film, I developed a naturalistic style animation. We had to get as close as possible to the behavior. To get this result, I watched hours and hours of animal videos, which I studied and selected to give animators everything they need to know.
And last year, Leo gave an hour-long presentation on how he achieved it all, even going so far as to speak at the Blender conference, showing in detail how and what to do with a cat if you want to animate it in 3D.
The film was made with Blender. This software offers many possibilities to handle all the technical challenge. For example, to animate the long shot, we could work separately on a different part of the shot at the same time and combine, at the end, each scene into one file with a simple copy-paste. In addition to this, I created a workflow and methods that fitted with the production and the director, which permit us to do the whole animation with about 20 animators and in only 6 months. And I'm very proud of the result.
So the Flow cat is half French. But one more thing that is even more complicated in this film, however, was made exclusively in Latvia. And a warning about this comes from Gints himself.
Tip for filmmakers: avoid featuring water in your film. Very difficult.
Mārtiņš Upitis created various add-ons for Blender alongside the film. And now, one is also about water. Mārtiņš has been fascinated by water and light since he was at school. He also studied at Rosenthal's art school, also published something now and then, and Gints approached him.
He found my videos on YouTube. He noticed that I was actually from the same town, studied at the same school, and it was immediately clear that we could work together. It's not that you make one water and then copy it for all other scenes. If the water in the previous shot is transparent, the water in the next shot should be as transparent to have the same consistency. If you watch the film, the water changes throughout the film. It starts out clear, then it's cloudy because of all the flooding, and then the cloudiness slowly fades away, going from greenish to bluish, and finally to a dark sea. I like the shots where the camera is not quite above the water and not quite underwater. For example, the scene where the flood has just happened and the cat is trying to get out of the water. It was one of the most difficult shots.
And he worked with water from the very beginning to the very end, because water interacts with the environment, with the characters who get wet, also with the lights, for example.
Well, yes, it's also the case that underwater, a cat's coat will change slightly and it will darken because any material that is porous gets wet. It becomes darker and shinier. And here are all these videos I made for Gints. Here, for example, a storm needs to be designed. This is the very beginning. Gints drew a flying cat. I made the waves where they should be. Then the animator goes over again, and after these waves, he then shows how the wave is moved. He makes an animation of a cat, because an interaction is happening on both sides, because the cat has to react. Here, for example, you could see the water coming over, but then the animator animates it so that the cat's head is always above the water.
So the environment is there, the plants are there, the characters are there and moving, the water is there, and that's it. Not quite yet. There are an immersive camera and framing too. Gints' special signature style is largely done by Gints himself, but also by his right-hand man, Peterus Tennysons, who graduated from film school in the UK, but worked for many years as a graphic designer. At some point, he met Mattis, who invited him to be part of the Flow team.
It's like in a computer game. You have to hover the camera all the time to pinpoint the markers at their location. This is one of the scenes I made, where a cat is chased away by the dogs. It was very interesting to see that Gints had a very clear idea of how everything should be put together. Why does the shot work or not? But of course, there are situations where even Gints doesn't have the right word on the go, or a way to articulate it, and a day or two later, he might come along and say, hey, let's try changing this and say, make this point shorter in the scene. Then go home in the evening, watch some film, look, pay attention to the camera movement. Gints also gave me, how can I say, suggestions on films and cameramen to watch so you can understand exactly how to move the camera. One of the films he mentioned was Children of Men.
And yes, we already know that. Children of Men is very much in the taste of both Gints and Mattis. Another important thing about Peterus is that he designed both the credits and the posters for the film. He also designed the special Flow stamp and created the film's two-dimensional black cat, which will later adorn the Flow team's white shirts at Cannes. Finally, animal sounds and film music. And introducing the Gurwal Koik Galas, sound designer from France, who has begged to work with Gints. He was that impressed by Gints' film Away, which he saw in Paris.
I am the sound designer. This means I created and collected all the sounds you hear in the film. The animal voices, the environmental sound, the wind, the sea, the sound of a boat. And this is a very unique project for a sound designer, of course, because there is no dialogue and there is no human actors.
Easy to say, but not so easy to create. His personal cat, after seeing the microphone, hadn't meowed for some time. He had to use cat voices from record libraries. The dogs were fine, but capybaras, which he had specially come to the zoo to see, again were problematic. They were not making sounds at all, so the sound of the capybara was voiced by a baby camel. Also, voice of the secretary bird in the film is not real, because in real life it is supposed to be very scary. Lemur sounds are accompanied by relatives, monkeys, and also, the whale sounds are far from being whales. Here is what Gurwal writes on its Facebook account.
I had to find another sound for the whale's breathing, because the real whale could not be recorded. It took almost 2 days, listening to many animals, playing with different speeds and pitches. I don't know where they found the tiger. The tiger had a voice problem or was a very old tiger. I increased the sound for it to become a whale.
And it's not just animals. Everything has a sound. Wind, water.
For the footsteps, Bertrand, the Foley artist, used different gloves with various textures on the fingertips. And for the sound of the cat falling into the water, he sometimes used just a newspaper.
And finally, the music, whose original author, as in the film Away, is Gints himself, composing it on his computer, not understanding a note.
I started writing music while I was still writing the script. It's very important for me because I need music to guide me. I knew that on this journey, the cat's goal was to reach the giant rock towers so that he thinks he can escape the floods. But for a long time, I couldn't understand what would actually happen when he gets there. Only when I had a piece of music, I understood what the scene should be.
But this time he is accompanied by Richard Zilbalodis, percussionist and composer. And it is not the first time he composed music for films. And yes, this time the film started with Gints's own music when it came to Richard's.
I was, to be honest, surprised by what I heard from him as a composer, although he calls himself an amateur composer, because I was expecting something like the film Away, which was very meditative in nature, slow music. But I was surprised because it was the complete opposite. There were a lot of rhythmic things, minimalist things though, both for percussion and for various synthesizer instruments. There were a couple, of course, the slow themes. And I realized that probably the main job for me was to meddle as little as possible in the material he wrote, but to really add to it.
And added to it in this way, Gints' music and Richard's addition.
This is his sketch. And then I do the post-processing afterwards, but this hasn't been mixed yet. This is how it sounded like. You can hear that there is, as they say, a lot of atmosphere. Other instruments are present, and there's not a string put in yet, of course, inside.
With Sinfonietta Riga Chamber Orchestra musicians, they have managed to create that special atmosphere. These shots show Richard's conducting, but filming it all was done by Gints himself. They had conversations about all this in the past. Should it be done or not? Why such grandiosity?
Mattis and Gints said that maybe there could be a small ensemble to play it and so on. Okay, good. Because Gints had a very broad electronic sound score. But it was clear to me very quickly that it would be very difficult without strings. And then I said to Mattis, I said, well, we can't do without the strings. And then Mattis did what he had to do, find the money to do it all. Fortunately, he did. He found it. And that's why we've got a really, really good soundtrack for all of this.
And then there are different leitmotifs. What kind for the cat?
I thought, well, for me, what instrument could be associated with a cat? The first thing that came to my mind was the bass clarinet, because the bass clarinet is such a very sweet, soft, timbrely, very soft, pleasant sound. But the instrument itself has a very wide range, and there are many different colors to show. And I found it very associative somehow, with the cat, and yes, all the other characters too. Such interesting revelations. We have a capybara theme, something that was given to an African instrument balafon. But of course, in Latvia, I don't think there are any balafons at all. But it's a very related instrument to marimba. So this is the normal marimba sound, but I had to make it like this. But I played a lot on the bells. And yes, it's a children's instrument, but I think it's a very, very good one. Then I used this. My parents brought me this drum from Tunisia 20 years ago. I play it in many different ways. There are a lot of running scenes, very fast percussion. I played toms, big drum with all sorts of wobbles. I experimented a lot.
And now the film was almost ready. The third part, life of the film, premiere at Cannes, lobby, prizes. May 2024, Cannes, on the French Riviera, is the annual home of the Cannes Film Festival. Glitz and glamour, but it also hosts a film competition. And this year the film Flow is also taking part. And here are all our flowerers walking and posing on the same red carpet. And here in Cannes, the premiere of the Flow will take place. For a few days, the festival organizers have also given Gints Zilbalodis a room at the 5-star Martinez Hotel. The price for a room in summer is around 800 euros per night. The others have to sleep elsewhere, but that's okay. A huge, exciting, much anticipated event. And here we mention another member of the Flow team, who has been coordinating, managing and organizing all of this, Data Cresone, production coordinator.
Of course, when the Cannes Film Festival came along, we had to organize the whole team going to Cannes, staying there and the premiere party itself. And this is a big whirlwind of work instead of a relaxation in Cannes itself. There is definitely strength in a team, and there is strength in co-producing. As we know, with a French producer, you have a much better chance of getting into the Cannes Film Festival. And that was probably one of the keys. Why did we get into the competition?
Yes, to be in competition. And needless to say, it's far from come and show your film. Being on Cannes Film Festival screen means to win your place. And where there's a fight, there's a strategy. Firstly, Cannes and Flow did not happen by chance. All production deadlines and plans were subordinated to this festival. But why Cannes?
Because it was the earliest of these festivals, and it's also the most prestigious thing. It is a real challenge, because at the Cannes Film Festival, animation is not really selected very often. And when an animated film goes there, it always attracts attention.
And if it premiered at one festival, others won't take it. The exception is Toronto, where the Flow later had its North American premiere, but not in Europe. On the one hand, all the films were submitted as an application. You sent in your film, pay the entry fee, which in Cannes is around 300 euros.
Clearly there is a lobby for this film, because thousands of films are submitted to the festival. And clearly there is a need to ensure that anyone who has the say in these matters will see the film through to the end. And then there is a company called a sales agency, which in our case is this French company. And they, the French producer and I, all write personal letters to call these selectors or the heads of the selection committees. We ask if you've already seen it, if the film is still in competition for a place at Cannes, and so on. It's quite a stressful period because it is clear that there are very few spots. And that animation is not always a priority for these big festivals.
The decision makers who decide whether or not a film should be in the competition are known, but they don't write about it on Facebook.
The problem is getting that person's phone number or email. It doesn't always show up, so he doesn't get the spam from every student who wants to get into the Cannes Film Festival. There is an inner circle and rules, unwritten rules. That's the internal environment that makes the selection. Clearly, any Martins who simply filled in the questionnaire and then wouldn't care what was happening to their film after would not be admitted to the Cannes Film Festival.
And in this fight, all arguments are good, and there are arguments. As a reminder, an animated film produced by Ron once won Cannes. Ron, so to speak, does not offer a bad product. Zilbalodis once won in the Annecy Festival in France, and any average person cannot do it. And the cat is wonderful, and no one on the team had any doubt about that.
In any case, this was a project worth fighting for to the end. And really, I think that there were all the ingredients that would have allowed it to go to the Cannes Film Festival.
And one day you get mail and Flo. Flo is admitted to Cannes, but nothing is over yet. The film must be managed to be polished till the last detail.
In other words, the last stage was extremely stressful, especially for Gints. Correcting all sorts of little inaccuracies, there were some fur coats that had glitched in a couple of scenes while combining water. I remember Constantinians, who also worked on the creation of water effects. There were situations where I would come back at 4 in the morning from a location for a feature film or something. And I came here to put some things away, and Constantins is still sitting at his computer and he sleeps on the sofa here at night. There was a feeling that some people were here 24/7 in the final stages of development. And it's no coincidence that one of these bathrooms is nicknamed Constantin's room, because he used to wash up there every morning and so on.
And eventually that day came on the 22nd of May, 2024. Premiere of Flo at Cannes Debussy Hall.
It was poetic.
And at the end of the screening, a standing ovation for 7 minutes. The flood of audience and applause in front of then 20-year-olds in Cannes of all places. Matisse, who recorded his days in Cannes, in his notes, recalls the event as follows.
It was the most emotionally powerful cinema-watching experience of my life so far. I had to get up on my feet. It was so scary to see so many people applauding at you.
The reaction of the audience was absolutely crazy.
And what about Gints? Well, Gints is Gints.
The premiere was the first time we saw it with the public. It was a relief to hear people laughing at the right moments. It was a very emotional experience.
2 days later, the award ceremony took place. Flo got nothing. No, that's not quite true. Here's a photo of George Lucas. But seriously, at Cannes, where the competition is held alongside the film market, Flo filmmakers receive a very valuable contract with US film distributor companies Sideshow and Janus Film for worldwide showings. And that means that the cat will start living the big life of cinemas and streaming platforms and start making money. But as for the prizes, waiting for them lasted only 20 days. At the Annecy Animation Festival, it receives 4 awards at once, including jury and audience favorites. And then, after that, a list of prizes that Latvia had never seen before. Here's a list you can use to learn what film festivals are happening around the world and how many different organizations give awards. Until earlier this year, Flo also received a Golden Globe in the US for the first time in the history of Latvian cinema. In ice hockey, it would be a victory in the finals. Not even Ron, the animation production grandmaster, has ever won a Golden Globe.
I had success. I've had success in previous animated films, and I've won a lot of awards. I am in a situation where I have to ask myself, but what am I going to do now? I have to retire.
Flo was also nominated for a British Academy Film Award, or BAFTA, and in the January 23rd this year, also for Oscar. And Gints is happy too. Miracle after miracle. But is it really just a miracle? No, not at all. For example, winning a Golden Globe is not just about sending a film to Los Angeles.
The Golden Globe voters are journalists, film journalists from all over the world, and then they watch, judge, and vote. What we need to do is to get as many of these Golden Globe voters as possible to see this film. So you have to have screenings, you have to send emails to remind them. Here is such a film, and it is part of a marketing campaign.
Or again, work and work. In this case, it is already being done by the US distributor, which hired the PR company Cinetic.
They have worked on many films that have been successful Oscar campaigns, such as The Parasite, Drive My Car. I think they are also working on Inora this year and The Brutalist.
Because it's not only an honor and glory to win awards at this level.
Clearly, these awards are also a marketing tool for films and very, very powerful tool. Clearly, there is a certain, let's say, audience for films which have Oscar nominations and BAFTA nominations and Golden Globe nominations or awards. They mean a lot to them, and then perhaps those people will go and see the film. For this reason, for example, because of the Oscar nomination, Flow will have a second release in the US close to the Oscars. The distributor has again reserved a theatrical release for the film, to be rescreened and watched by those viewers who might have not had a chance to watch it. I think because of the Golden Globes, we got this very good streaming deal in the US, where the film will be shown on the Max platform, which is one of the most powerful streaming platforms with a lot of users.
Here's how the Flow ad looks like on the Max streaming platform. The cat is in it a bit, but at the foreground, nominations and citations. And you need stars, and you need social media. And it works like that all over the world. And in Japan, for example, Gints already had a fan from the time movie Away premiered. A Japanese star and video game author, Hideo Kojima. He liked it. He listed Flow as his #1 favorite animated film of 2024. And now, the Japanese undoubtedly know about it too. Awards season may be over now, but the life of Flow is just beginning. It will soon be shown in the huge country of China.
Flow has now earned more than $20 million in global box office. Not bad for a film that cost 3.5 million euros, and we are yet to be shown in many big countries.
Does this mean that Gints and Matas will now also be our first film millionaires?
We will not stroll around the streets in rags, but will there be millions upon millions? I can't promise anything there. I think it will be a decent amount, but I don't know if it will be millions.
And finally, some news from Cannes. To be precise, from Matthijs' notes. The afternoon after his return from Cannes, Gints sent me a link to his latest musical composition and announced that work on the next film had officially started. Good luck.